Dodging deportation. I'll be speaking to public policy specialist Lucy White in the studio tonight. Plus, I'll be discussing the bizarre tale of British MPs lobbying for an airport in Pakistan. You heard that right. What on earth is this telling us about the dire state of our country? That's State of the Nation tonight with me, Matt Goodwin, right here on GB News. Now, I'll also be joined tonight by my top panel, founder of Novara Media, Arabistani, and deputy editor of Conservative Home, Henry Hill. As ever, let me know your views at gbnews.com/your say. And of course, you can reach out on X at GoodwinMJ or at GB News. But now it's time for the News Bulletin with Sophia Wensler.
Matt, thank you. Good evening. It's just gone 8 o'clock. These are your headlines. Donald Trump is set to unveil his new tariffs in the next hour as European leaders warn against a trade war. Meanwhile, Sir Keir Starmer says the UK rules nothing out as it braces for Trump's expected global tariffs. The US president's so-called Liberation Day event is expected around 9 o'clock this evening, UK time, with fears of a 25% import tax on British cars and wider tariffs on UK exports. Speaking at Prime Minister's questions today, Sir Keir Starmer warned that a trade war benefits nobody. Meanwhile, the Chancellor has said the UK would not be out of the woods on tariffs, even if it could secure an economic deal with the United States. Rachel Reeves told the Commons Treasury Committee that the main impact on the British economy will be from global tariffs rather than UK-specific ones. She said, "We don't want just to see an agreement between the UK and the US. We want to see free trade, fair trade continue." Now, it's being reported that Donald Trump has told members of his cabinet that Elon Musk will leave his government role in the coming months. The US president had tasked the Tesla CEO to lead efforts to cut government funding and dismantle various US agencies as a special government employee. But Politico reported that both Trump and Musk decided in recent days that Musk will soon return to his businesses. But Mr. Trump's press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, called the reports garbage, writing, "Elon Musk and President Trump have both publicly stated that Elon will depart from public service as a special government employee when his incredible work at Doge is complete." In other news, a man has been charged with 64 offences in connection with an investigation into a Hull funeral directors. Humberside Police have said an investigation was launched into legacy independent funeral directors after they received reports of the concern for the care of the deceased in March of 2024. 47-year-old Robert Bush is charged with 30 counts of preventing a lawful and decent burial, 30 counts of fraud by false representation, 2 counts of theft from charities, 1 count of fraud and another of fraudulent trading. And women are set to continue having babies later in life and having smaller families than previous generations, according to ONS projections. The Office for National Statistics says girls born in 2025 are likely to have, on average, 1 child by the age of 36, while for the generation born in the 1950s, this occurred by the age of 26. Women born in 2007 are projected to have most of their children after they turn 30, while women born in the early 20th century had already had most of their children by that age. The latest analysis comes months after the ONS published data which found the fertility rate in England and Wales had dropped to its lowest rate on record. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Matt.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back to State of the Nation tonight on GB News with me, Matt Goodwin. Now, the world is braced this evening for what US President Donald Trump has labelled Liberation Day, holding true to his campaign promise at the election last year to announce the imposing of tariffs on global imports. Donald Trump is set to speak live from the White House Rose Garden in just under 1 hour's time. Cars, steel and aluminium are expected to be hit with levies of up to 25%, with a 10 to 20% universal tariff on all goods imported into the United States also said to be on the cards. Here in Britain, a mere week after the Chancellor stood before the House of Commons and desperately clawed back her fiscal headroom, a member of the Budget Watchdogs Committee has warned that tonight's announcement from America could demolish her buffer in one fell swoop. The Prime Minister reassured the country this afternoon, warning against a knee-jerk reaction. Check this out.
We are working with all sectors that are likely to be impacted, and we're guided by our national interest at all times. And that's why we've said we won't rule anything out. But it is important at a moment like this that we don't have knee-jerk reactions, that we are actually cool-headed about this.
Now, during his inaugural address in January, President Trump made it his personal mission to overhaul the US trade system immediately. But what we're witnessing today is not just the politics of one president, not at all. Trump's tariffs reflect, I think, a growing rejection of what we might call hyper-globalization, an economic model which ever since the 1990s has insisted that nation-states be ripped open economically to trade liberalization, deregulation and unfair free trade practices, and culturally to mass uncontrolled migration. There's nothing wrong with free trade when it is done right and when the integrity of nation-states is protected. But hyperglobalization led to unfair trade advantages for some states and countries, notably China, at the expense of America's economy, and often it prioritized global firms over national citizens. And of course, global firms often have no real sense of obligation to the nation-states that they're operating in. And contrary to what the expert class and the likes of Bill Clinton and Tony Blair told us in the late 1990s, this model of economic globalization disproportionately smashed the working class in Western states, in places like the Rust Belt in America and, of course, the Red Wall here in England, along with their communities, pushing many, often working class men into alcoholism and drug addiction. Look past Donald Trump, and I think there's a much bigger critique of that economic model playing out here, which has been building since the 1990s, including among many people around Donald Trump, J.D. Vance and their camp. As ever, let me know your views about all of this at gbnews.com/yoursay, or meet me on X at GoodwinMJ, or, of course, at GBNews. But with me now down the line is CEO of Euro-Pacific Asset Management, Peter Schiff, who knows a lot more than I do about what we're about to witness this evening. Peter, talk us through the logic behind Trump's tariffs and Liberation Day. Put us in the Team Trump orbit, if you like, and just explain to viewers at home what's driving this big push tonight.
Well, I think it's more politics than logic. I mean, first of all, I don't think many Americans are going to feel that liberated when it turns out that the main thing they've been liberated from is low-cost consumer goods. And, you mentioned, what does this mean for Great Britain? If anything, it's probably a small positive for Britain, because a lot of the goods that are currently being exported to the United States, some of them won't be exported because they'll be too expensive for Americans to buy them. And so those goods will be offered to other consumers at somewhat lower prices, which will benefit British, because you're now going to have access to products that Americans can no longer afford.
Now, Peter, what about this argument, though, that actually what this is about is a reset? It's a global reset. It's about pushing back against the likes of China, who have basically been manipulating the free trade system, the economic model over the last 20, 30 years, and that actually this is about trying to regain ground that was lost under this regime.
I don't think it's a deliberate manipulation. It's just a consequence of the nature of the beast right now, with the U.S. dollar being the world's reserve currency, and the Chinese looking to accumulate dollars, and Americans looking to accumulate stuff. We don't have the manufacturing capacity, the infrastructure, the supply chains anymore to produce the stuff that China makes for us and other countries. And in the short run, that really amounts to a huge subsidy for the American economy, because we get to consume stuff without having to produce it. And there's a lot of resources that you have to use to produce stuff, and all we do is print money, and we export that. So we send our inflation to China. They send us their goods, and we win. But in the long run, we're selling off a lot of our assets, because the Chinese and everybody else take the dollars that they earn and they buy our stocks, they buy our bonds, they buy our real estate. So they're accumulating income-producing assets while we blow our money on stuff. But in the short run, we enjoy artificially low prices and artificially low interest rates. We get to consume what we don't produce. We get to borrow and spend what we don't save. And so to the extent that we try to upset that gravy train, in the short run, it has profound negative consequences in the U.S. And politically, I don't think anybody is ready for this. I don't think the Trump administration is. I don't think the Fed is. The magnitude of the recession that this is going to unleash and the potential financial crisis, dollar crisis, I think it's going to backfire. And I don't think they have the guts to stick it out. I think they're going to end up going back to big government stimulus, quantitative easing, and it may accelerate a real U.S. dollar and sovereign debt crisis that is long overdue. And we've been kicking the can down the road for years. Maybe this will inadvertently accelerate that day of reckoning.
So your thesis is that this is basically going to accelerate America's move into some kind of economic crisis. We're going to hear a different perspective or alternative perspective shortly. Peter, if I can, while we've got you, put yourself in the shoes of Keir Starmer, number 10 Downing Street. Put yourself in the shoes of Emmanuel Macron in France, or in Berlin in Germany, or Rome in Italy. I mean, how should nation states be responding over the next few days and weeks to this?
They shouldn't do anything. I mean, the worst thing you can do is respond in kind. Remember, when it comes to a trade war, the most damage is done by the nation that's imposing the tariffs. Now, there's a lot of political pressure, to respond. Oh, they've put tariffs on our goods. You got to put tariffs on their goods. But it's Americans that will be hurt by the American tariffs. Now, there are certain groups in America that will benefit from the tariffs, and that's why they're there. But there is a broader population that will be harmed by them. And the same thing would happen in the UK. If the UK were to respond by tariffing the British, because we tariffed ourselves, there would be some winners in Britain and there'd be losers. But the losers would outnumber the winners. So the best thing that Britain could do, and anybody else, is to do nothing. Right, and allow the United States to damage itself. Now, as an American, I'm not happy about what's happening, although I do know that this has to change. It was inevitable. I always thought that the world would bring about the crisis by dumping the dollar and refusing to continue to subsidize the American economy in this way. But we may be doing it to ourselves, which in a way is better, because the longer we delay the crisis, the worse it's going to be. But again, my thought is the powers in America don't realize what's about to happen. Right? They don't know what they're unleashing here. And okay. I'm worried about how they're going to respond to a crisis that they have no idea is about to hit.
OK, well, Peter Schiff, thank you. There are some predictions of a big economic crisis along the way. With me now in the studio is Sarah Elliott, Director of the UK-US Special Relationship Unit at the Prosperity Institute. I should say at the outset that the Prosperity Institute is funded by the Legatum Group, which is one of the lead investors in the holding company of GBNews. That all said, Sarah, Peter Schiff there saying that actually this is going to unleash a big problem within the United States of America, and the end result of all of this might actually be an unanticipated economic crisis within America.
Well, it could, but we don't know what the president's going to say tonight. Right. He could show up and actually say, I've thought about it, I've changed my mind, and I'm only going to do a 2% tariff. Yeah. Or I'm not going to do any, or I'm going to do specific sector by sector. Nobody knows what this president is going to do, and he's holding court very well. But on the other hand, if he does institute a broad tariff strategy, especially on the UK, for instance, which it's not talked about, but in the United Kingdom, on all the imports, we put a 20% VAT on everything that comes into the UK. So it would not surprise me if the president then said, well, we're going to put a 20% tariff on all British goods coming into the US. If that happens, it's actually just a starting point for a negotiation. Let's talk about this. Actually, maybe we should remove the tariffs altogether. Maybe we'll mutually find a more beneficial agreement. And that's what the president is doing. He's been doing it his whole life. He starts out way out here with some claim or some idea, and then you work back with your trading partner to an agreeable point.
So let's just look at this specific special relationship for a minute. So we've had Keir Starmer. You can see on the screens Keir Starmer when he went over to visit Donald Trump in the Oval Office, made this nice gesture, having a second state visit. That seemed to cement the special relationship. We've since seen President Trump sign off on the Chagos deal, which perhaps was a surprise to many people in the UK, but nonetheless suggests that maybe relations at the centre of power are pretty good. It may be that the UK gets some kind of more favourable outcome on the tariffs than the European Union. Let's wait and see how that unfolds. But where would you put the health of the special relationship right now as of this evening? I mean, is this actually as robust as it once was? Is it getting better? Is it getting weaker? What's your assessment of that?
My assessment is it's still strong based on all those items you've mentioned here. And in fact, the U.S. allowing Lord Mandelson to be the U.S. ambassador was also a step of goodwill from the United States. But I would say it's in transition, you know, and the special relationship is always there regardless of who is prime minister or president, because we have shared values, a shared outlook on the world, the same adversaries. But they are two very different leaders, and I think they're both trying to find their way, and they value it. In some ways, the United States has always valued the UK for diplomatic reasons. They're the good cop. The Americans are kind of the ones that come in with the guns, and the Brits help smooth things over. And then from the British side, America has a $29 trillion economy. Take advantage of it. We want to be your best friends. Let's trade. Let's do more business. The U.S. is the largest foreign direct investor in the UK.
But having said that, Trump's also said this week in some of the headlines that, well, there's no trade deal unless there's free speech. And I've noticed on X, I mean, I can say many of the people who seem to be my most prolific retweeters are Americans, including people like Elon Musk, who have been looking at some of the cases we've seen in recent weeks with police officers arresting parents who complained about their school in a WhatsApp group. Against the backdrop of the Southport atrocities and the reaction to those, the protester outside of an abortion clinic. There's no getting away from this. The free speech issue is on the radar of Americans as they go into these trade discussions.
100%. And that is also very off-putting to civil servants and diplomats who've never dealt with this type of issue before. This is a domestic issue. What does this have to do with trade? But J.D. Vance was very clear in his Munich security speech, what was it, in March, where he said, if you are Europe, if we share the same values, are you really defending them domestically? And if you're not, do we really have that in common? So I think maybe we do need to get back to the drawing board and rediscover what makes the West special. Why are we defending this? Why is it worth defending?
Well, I can imagine that ever since that speech in Munich, the Americans have probably watched what's happened in France with Marine Le Pen effectively being taken off the ballot after this judgment in a French court. We're reading tonight that in Germany, there's a new deal apparently underway to take Alternative for Germany candidates off the ballot if they're seen to have violated certain hate laws. I suspect people in the White House will be watching much of this closely too. The other thing we're reading is that the relationship between Donald Trump and Elon Musk might be changing, and that Elon Musk might be taking a step back and focusing more on his businesses than government. What's your read on that? Has that got some truth to it, or is this a sort of story that's being a bit blown out of proportion?
Well, there might be some truth to it, and for a couple reasons. One, as you know, Tesla has been targeted by domestic terrorists in the United States right now, where Tesla vehicles are being vandalized broadly, and it's affecting the Tesla business. Then we just had a special election of a judge in Wisconsin where Elon Musk really put his weight into that election and put $25 million into it, and yet the other guy won, the Democrat won. And so he's not getting a lot of good headlines lately. Also, Doge seems to be really operating and doing its job. They have cut through many departments already. There are a lot of great, really smart engineers and volunteers, and they're getting the job done, which they hope to finish up relatively soon by the summer. So maybe it is time for Mr. Musk to step back a little bit. As we know, it's the President Donald Trump who likes to make the headlines.
And just lastly, if I may, so you're advising Keir Starmer in some sort of fantasy land for a minute. What would you be saying to him in terms of how he should be responding this evening and tomorrow to Trump's tariffs. I mean, how should the Labour government really be navigating this part of the Trump presidency?
I would say, do not have a knee-jerk reaction. Let's find out where we can find common ground. And let's actually, as opposed to raising tariffs and making it painful for the Americans in response, let's find ways to remove it, because that's best for both economies.
Yeah, well, it does seem that there's some sort of coming together in the middle, but let's see how the relationship between Keir Starmer and Donald Trump evolves over the next little while. Now, don't miss Donald Trump's address to the world tonight as he unveils his tariffs for countries around the world. This is quite a moment in the Trump presidency. Join Patrick Christis for a special programme tonight from 9 p.m. Patrick's going to be assessing the effect of all of this on Britain and, of course, most importantly, the effect of all of this on you watching at home. Well, thank you to Sarah Elliott for joining me in the studio tonight. After the break, Kemi Badenoch has exclusively revealed to GB News her plans on an issue that GB News has also helped push onto the agenda, which is the issue of a national inquiry into the grooming gangs. But will it be enough? We'll be talking about that question in just 2 minutes' time. I'll see you shortly.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest,
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Because we've got this Snow White premiere. What's going on with it? I've been hearing about this Snow White film for about 2 years, and every time it doesn't seem to be good news in the headlines.
No. I mean, it's quite unusual for a kids' film to get so much controversy, but it has been sort of dogged by sort of bad headlines and bad press for quite a long time. And then in the sort of immediate run-up to its release, it looks as though they've sort of scaled back a lot of the promotion to sort of avoid more controversy. But that in itself is creating headlines. I mean,
we're seeing some of the trailer now for anyone watching it on TV. We've seen some of that. I must say, when I watched the trailer, I wasn't particularly impressed by it.
Well, I mean, some of the Disney live actions have been brilliant and some of them have been less good. I mean, I sort of think any press is good press. I mean, more people are aware that the film's coming out now than would have been if we hadn't had all this bad press. And I suspect that, I mean, people who are going to go are people taking their kids. And the kids aren't bothered about what one of the actresses has said or whether the dwarves are real or CGI. Like, I think it'll probably do very well. I think it depends whether it's any good, really. I think that's the most important thing. I think the negative sort of press and controversy around it probably isn't going to have a massive factor in the takings.
Yeah. What does scaled back mean in terms of the premiere? What does that actually, how will that look?
So a lot of films will have a big premiere in Leicester Square. That's a sort of like, I guess in Europe, the sort of HQ for premieres, and you get a lot of, you know, the world will jet in to cover that. Whereas this has had a sort of quite a small scale premiere in northern Spain in a castle. So it kind of looked quite grand, but it was on a very small scale. So, and there haven't been as many interviews and things like that with the cast, I think, because of everything that's happening. So it has been scaled back a bit. But I mean, like, we're talking about it now, so it's working, whatever they are doing.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Westminster, the ultimate clique. And you're fighting like rats in a sack. But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask. OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician. Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off-limits. You had the power then. Yeah, and now you've lost it. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless. But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show. Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to State of the Nation tonight on GB News with me, Matt Goodwin. We were just discussing Trump's tariffs and you've been sending your views in. Claire says, have you ever ordered something from the US and been unexpectedly clobbered with tax when you pick it up at the post office? You only ever make that mistake once, says Claire. Thomas says the Yanks have a state sales tax equivalent to VAT. Why do they not understand this? If we remove VAT from all imported goods, then we have to remove VAT from all goods imported or home produced. Keep your views coming in. Of course, meet me on X. Now, for those of you who missed it early this evening, GB News' very own Charlie Peters, who of course has been at the epicenter of the rape gangs crisis in this country, sat down with Kemi Badenoch and discussed Britain's shame. The Groomer Gang scandal, or of course, as some people call it, the rape gang scandal. Check this out.
There has been a lot of investigation, but it has not been anywhere near the scale required in order to get to the root of what's been happening across our country. We are still pushing for Labour to start a national inquiry. And today, we're going to be putting some amendments down in the crime bill so that we can have another vote, which they can't obscure like they did previously, have another vote so that MPs and Parliament can vote on ensuring that we get full justice for all of those victims.
Well, as you heard there, the Leader of the Opposition plans to table another amendment to a Labour bill forcing a national inquiry on the rape gangs. But as the Tories had 14 years to implement this inquiry themselves, is this actually just party politics? Well, with me now is my top panel, founder of Novara Media, Aaron Bastani, and deputy editor of Conservative Home, Henry Hill. Aaron, Kemi Badenoch trying to get some momentum around the rape gang issue again. I mean, she's going to table amendments, but given the numbers in the House of Commons, where are those going to go?
Yeah, it's not going to go anywhere. I think the motivations as well are really interesting here. So there was a report in 2022, it announced 20 recommendations. At the time, Kemi Badenoch was a senior politician in the Conservative government. In the intervening 2 years between then and the July 2024 election, none of those recommendations were implemented by the government. So I find it strange that you have a report widely respected, people involved, really serious people, offering really substantive proposals. In government with power, they did nothing. And now in opposition, she's, I think, playing to the cameras for political theatre.
Just before I move to Henry Hill, Labour, how are Labour going to respond to this? You've got tentacles across the left of British politics, but Keir Starmer, Yvette Cooper, is there any movement on this rape gangs issue, or are they just going to keep knocking it back?
So there are those 20 recommendations, and I think on a couple of them they've made changes. They've enacted them on a few minor ones in terms of safeguarding with people that work in the public sector, etc. Certain other proposals I think may happen in the next year or two, wraparound services for survivors, maybe a compensation scheme. But I think broadly speaking, the view amongst Labour MPs, probably rightly, is that the more salient this is as an issue, the worse it is for them. Hence the incentives for Kemi Badenoch to make it a big story, keep it in the national news agenda. But as I've said, she was complicit in not doing anything for 2 years herself.
Henry Hill, you are more connected than most people to the Conservative Party. What's the logic here? What's the politics behind Kemi Badenoch's move here?
Essentially, as Aaron said, this is a good issue, basically a really bad issue for the government. Every day that this story is leading the agenda, very bad for Sir Keir Starmer. And if you're the Conservative Party and you're concerned about trying to make up some territory with reform, and actually the Conservatives seem to be making the running on this issue so far, that's all to the good. They always have the challenge that you've mentioned on every issue, that they've just come out of office. If this is so important, why didn't they do anything before? But I actually think the more interesting proposal they've put down is that they want to get a publication of an annual breakdown of the composition of people who perpetrate these crimes. The real question is, why don't we have that data for everything, right? Because it's remarkable the extent to which the British state just actively refuses, and in some cases has, in the last few years, stopped collecting granular data about the sort of ethnicity, religion,
immigration status,
or if they're or for immigrants, like where they're from. Like, we can get amazing charts out of Denmark that are like, okay, this community gives none of that is available because the British state is actively choosing not to collect data.
I mean, this is the thing that gets me. On the one hand, the state and political parties accuse people out there of misinformation or disinformation, but then they're not making information available to taxpayers and citizens so they can see the effects of these policies, not just the rape gangs, but also the effect of migration on crime, the economy, welfare state. We've had people on this show, Rob Bates and others, who had to submit freedom of information requests to get that information. So why is the state not making that available?
Well, generally because they think it will be embarrassing. I actually got the start. Data is amazing because it's one of the most really boring things, right? If I come on here and I'm like, actually, I think the government should collect better data.
Well, actually, I think data is really cool, but I'm a former recovering professor.
Yeah, exactly. But it sounds really technical. But it's one of the most powerful things you can do. I got my start talking about devolution, right? One of the big things I kept telling the government to do, force the different devolved governments to publish comparable data about the performance of schools and hospitals. Because Scotland and Wales have deliberately changed how they collect the stats, so you can't tell how badly they're doing. It's one of those things that is actually just essential to good policy making. And anyone who is actively advocating against better data is usually a bit suspect.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Aaron, Henry there mentioning that actually the Conservatives are really doing the running on this issue, and I sort of agree with him. I mean, where does this leave the Reform-Labour dynamic? Because obviously the Conservatives are probably not going to be challenging Reform, not challenging Labour, sorry, in lots of the heartlands in Northern England, in Wales. It's going to be Reform. But Reform have not been as loud on this issue as perhaps some people might have expected them to be.
I am so curious about Reform and how they're going to perform in the upcoming local elections. You've, of course, got the by-election very soon as well.
Yeah, Runcorn and Hillsborough.
Yeah, I'll be up there the week before that by-election on May the 1st, I think it is. I suspect that what Reform are doing now is what they haven't done in the past, which is rather than trying to set the news agenda at a national level, they are assiduously campaigning in the places that matter, allocating resources there, and they're focusing particularly on that by-election in Runcorn. And I think that's probably come at a cost of being a part of the national conversation, certainly for the last month and a bit. Could be wrong, but that's the mistake that people like Reform have made in the past in this country. The Green Party got a much smaller vote than Reform in the last general election, but only got one MP less because they really boxed clever with resource allocation. Exactly.
Just briefly, while I've got you, the Labour MPs, are they starting to move on ECHR, Article 3, Article 8, this idea that actually they're going to have to toughen up on the illegal migration issue in order to try and fend off Nigel Farage and Reform?
Well, some feel they have to. You've had Mike Tapp, the Dover and Deal MP, being very conspicuous on this stuff, because if he's not, he's going to lose his seat. But I think right now, the word I would use for Labour, whether you're left, right, wherever they are in the country, is autopilot. I don't think they're really taking seriously, actually, just how badly they may do at the next election.
Well, 21% in the latest polls this week, which is a shockingly low number. Henry Hill, you still see Robert Jenrick campaigning out there as if he's running for the leadership. You've got some pretty widespread questions being asked, let's say, over Kemi Badenoch. Is she able to move past some of this criticism now? Is there a sense that actually the Conservatives are sort of digging in around the new leader, or is that speculation about, oh, crikey, have we got this wrong? Is that all now moving into the background?
I mean, I think you need to be really careful about any of this kind of, oh, 1 week she's doing really well. Actually, no, she's now stable. Then the next week she's doing really badly and everyone's panicking. The net result of that is basically that people are panicking. The challenge, Robert Jenrick.
Well, what are you hearing? You're more connected than
the thing is that she has two problems, or one problem in two parts, which is that she ran for the Conservative leadership on an explicitly zero policy manifesto. We'll work it all out afterwards, and that might be or might not be a good strategy. But the problem is that it then means that her ability to do the job on a day-to-day basis, the actual skill of being leader of the opposition, becomes more important. And she has had a couple of good interventions in Parliament, but she's generally not viewed to perform well at PMQs. And she is being, as you say, upstaged by Robert Jenrick with the much better video quality and everything else. So she's not stable, but she's not under immediate threat.
Well, watch this space. I'll be speaking to my panel a bit more later on. Now, it's just under half an hour until Donald Trump takes a podium in the White House again. Oh, crikey, get ready. He's going to be speaking from the Rose Garden, so stay with us on GB News for a live special with Patrick Christis in just a few moments' time. But before that, 200 of the most dangerous Albanian criminals in Britain, this is a really terrible story, including murderers and sex predators, are still in the UK despite a £4.3 million deal to remove them. I'm going to be talking to a top policy wonk in a moment about why on earth we can't get these foreign criminals out of our country. I will see you in just a couple of minutes.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast. Hi there. Plenty of sun to be had in the UK over the next few days, but if you're thinking of heading further afield, there are still some thunderstorms across Greece and Turkey, and some very unsettled weather moving through Madeira into the Canary Islands. A showery day to come on Thursday, and then further showers or spells of rain into Spain as well as Portugal. A few showers on Thursday for Italy, but the most showery weather will continue to affect Greece as well as Turkey. That is tending to ease away over the next few days into the weekend.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions, but every Friday night at 9 p.m. you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest,
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to State of the Nation tonight on GB News with me, Matt Goodwin. Now, 200 of the most dangerous Albanian criminals, including murderers and sex predators, were supposed to be removed from the UK and returned to their country as part of a £4.3 million deal signed under the last Tory government. However, 2 years on and just 8 of these serious offenders have been sent packing, leaving at least 1,200 Albanian criminals right here in UK prisons at the expense of, you guessed it, all of us British taxpayers. Don't know about you, but I'm getting increasingly frustrated and fed up with the failure to control our communities and borders. Well, joining me to discuss this in the studio now is public policy specialist Lucy White. Lucy, I'm just going to give you a couple of examples of things that we've seen recently. Firstly, a Pakistani paedophile who attacked a teenage girl remains in the UK after arguing that deportation would violate his human rights due to his alcoholism. I'm just going to show you another one. An Iraqi asylum seeker avoided deportation after meeting a woman on TikTok, proposing to her, and then claiming that his life was at risk when her family threatened to kill him. And lastly, an Iranian sex offender avoided deportation because apparently drink and drugs made him distrust authority, and therefore, if he was deported back to Iran, he might run into trouble when questioned by authorities. Millions of people out there, including people watching this show, are going to be reading these cases day in, day out in the national newspapers, shaking their heads, saying, what on earth has happened to our country and the ability of our country to actually remove foreign criminals? So what on earth has happened?
Well, Matt, seeing those headlines, you would think it were April Fool's Day, but that was yesterday. So the shocking thing is this is actually the state of our country. Yeah, so we need to find solutions ASAP. I think they all just need to be deported instantly. There is just simply no excuse. These people are not our problem.
So my argument has always been that basically we need to leave the European Convention on Human Rights, the ECHR. We need to reform or repeal the Human Rights Act, which entrenches the ECHR into domestic law. And we then basically need to take on an activist judicial system which appears more interested in allowing foreign criminals to stay in our country than actually serving the British hard-working, tax-paying, law-abiding majority out there who are paying for all of this carnage and chaos. I mean, exiting the ECHR would be a good start, would it not?
Yes, it would be a very good start. And just to give you some data to those the cases. So if we take Albania, for example, the UK sent £4.3 million to Albania to modernise its prisons in order, you know, it's sort of an agreement where if the UK pays Albania to modernise its prisons, then they would accept their criminals back. But the issue is...
Sorry, just treat me like an idiot for a minute. We paid them £4.3 million to improve their prisons in Albania while we are releasing criminals here in the UK because our prisons are falling apart and we can't expand them.
Yeah, it's absolute absurdity. So in Tirana, the capital of Albania, we are making a state-of-the-art prison. But it's not just that. So we're sending money to Albania, £4.3 million. Yet on top of that, it costs £40,000 per year per prisoner in the UK. So we're paying for 1,200 Albanian prisoners at a cost of £40,000 per year. Plus, we're sending money to Albania. But if you ask me, I say we shouldn't be paying any of this. We shouldn't be paying for Albanians to be here or for them to be in prison in Albania. Quite frankly, it's literally not our problem. And if you look at Wizz Air, there's a flight from London to Tirana at the cost of £23 per person. I say we take the money and we spend £23 per foreign criminal from Albania. We send them back and we never let them return.
Well, I think many people out there would agree with that, absolutely. Of course, Albanians were also, until recently, one of the largest groups on the small boats coming across the channel, making a mockery of our claim to be a sovereign, self-governing, independent nation. But out there in the country, there is this, I think, growing appetite to radically transform the legal architecture that surrounds our inability to control our borders. The Labour Party now, it appears, finally beginning to move on this issue of ECHR, or at least saying we need to get tough on Article 3 and Article 8, whereby foreign criminals and others use the ECHR to say, hey, what about my rights? What about my family life? What about my rights to a secure existence while demolishing communities up and down this country? Are we going to see real movement from the Labour Party on that? And I guess at the same time, you've got people like Robert Jenrick saying, well, I would like to leave the ECHR if I could, but of course, being unable really to do that, given that most of the Tory parliamentary party would oppose him doing that. So where are Labour and the Conservatives actually going to go on this issue of ECHR membership and whether we can finally deport these foreign criminals?
Well, to answer the first part of your question, Labour definitely are not going to do anything because they've been in power since July and they've done literally nothing. And if anything, in March last month, we received 4,000 illegal migrants in 1 month, which is absurd. Yeah. If they were going to do anything, it would be like Donald Trump in America. He took out ICE, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and removed thousands of illegal criminals already. So if we were going to see any action, we would have seen it by now, Matt. And the Conservatives, quite frankly, you know, I used to be a Conservative supporter myself. They had 14 years to do something. They did nothing. And actually, particularly under Boris Johnson, illegal migration just rapidly increased, but also legal migration. As did legal migration.
Yes. I mean, the so-called Boris wave. Boris Johnson was the guy that put mass immigration on steroids. But coming back to the small boat numbers, I think as of today, more than 6,600 people have entered Britain illegally on the small boats since January the 1st, which means that Keir Starmer's record on the small boats is the worst record of any Prime Minister, yet this is the guy saying he's going to smash the gangs.
Yeah, he just has no clue, honestly. You would almost have to come to the assumption that somebody is benefiting from this so much that this is why they're not stopping it.
Well, we know who's benefiting. The hotel providers are benefiting because we're all paying £5.5 million every day for hotels and accommodation. Right?
Precisely.
I mean, and also, alongside that, let's be frank, well, I'll be frank, no one else will say it, Labour MPs are benefiting because all of this makes them feel morally righteous and superior to everybody else because they think they're helping the country by presiding over this chaos, but actually they're the luxury belief class. They're not the ones who are going to have to pay the consequences of having asylum hotels in their communities, of paying upwards of £7 billion every year on this broken asylum system. It's British taxpayers. It's hard-working British people.
Precisely. I hate to say it, but it's actually harder to enter a nightclub than it is to enter the United Kingdom, because to enter a nightclub, you actually need to show your ID, whereas these illegal migrants just rock up on our shores, no passports, and it's like, sure, you know, here's a free hotel, why not?
Well, it's not only free hotels. They get cash cards, they get places on the NHS, they get places in local schools. And it's all, I think, really violating the British people's sense of fair play. But Lucy White, it's been great to have you with us to navigate this issue. I'm sure we'll have you on again very soon. Thank you to Lucy. Now, it is only 15 minutes until GB News' Trump tariff special, hosted by none other than Patrick Christis. Goodness knows what President Trump is going to say tonight. I'm sure we will all struggle to predict what will come out of his mouth. He will be bringing you all of the latest in the president's brewing trade war very soon, in just a couple of moments. But before that, get this, a group of British MPs, just when I thought this country couldn't be more bonkers, have been lobbying for the construction of a new airport in Pakistan. Are they putting identity politics over national British interests? I'm going to be exploring that question and a lot more with one of my favourite writers, Brendan O'Neill. I will see you in a couple of minutes.
Hello again and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. For most of us, it stays dry and clear during the next 24 hours. Some patchy cloud turning up, but in the southwest, a very different weather for Thursday compared with the last few days. Showers start to arrive because of an area of low pressure that's some distance to the southwest. Meanwhile, high pressure to the northeast keeps things dry and clear for most of us. There'll be a bit of patchy cloud forming over the Welsh Mountains, the Peak District, the Pennines overnight, one or two patches here and there elsewhere. But for many places, it's simply a dry and clear night with a keen easterly breeze. In the south, it's going to be frost-free. Further north, less windy. And as a result, a touch of frost to wake up to first thing, particularly for the Grampians, northeast Scotland. Further south, though, a very different start to the day for the far south and southwest. Here, showers start to turn up. These showers are going to be very hit and miss, but yeah, a few drops of rain, marking a change to the drier weather that we've had during the last week or so. But for much of Scotland into Northern Ireland, it's sunny skies from the word go. One exception, southeast Scotland through the Pennines into parts of Wales. That patchy cloud I mentioned, that's going to stick around for the first few hours of the day before eventually lifting and clearing. That leaves most of us with another sunny day. Again, an easterly breeze makes it feel cool, but very different for the south and southwest of England. Here, thicker cloud and outbreaks of rain on and off throughout the afternoon, turning more persistent in places as the day comes to an end. That moves north through Wales overnight into parts of Northern Ireland by the start of Friday, but it really fizzles out by this stage. And into Friday afternoon, well, the sunshine returns for the vast majority, but there will be some low cloud around the east coast, particularly for Edinburgh as we head into the weekend. Elsewhere, the sunshine continues and it stays warm away from the east.
Westminster, the ultimate clique. And you're fighting like rats in a sack. But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask. OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician. Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off-limits.
You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
and
say,
now you've lost it.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless.
But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show.
Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back to State of the Nation tonight with me, Matt Goodwin, on GB News. Now, in case you had not heard enough about Bonkers Britain, here's a story. Last week, a group of 20 members of Parliament and peers wrote to the Prime Minister of our country to lobby for the construction of a new international airport 5,000 miles away in Mirpur, Pakistan. 6 of this group were Labour MPs who had previously voted against Heathrow expansion, including Zara Sultana, who called the proposal reckless and indefensible, but now wants a new airport in Pakistan. Another one of the signatories was Tahir Ali, a man who also not long ago stood in the House of Commons and advocated for the introduction of blasphemy laws in Britain. So are the needs and interests of the British people now actually being put second to identity politics? Well, we were going to talk to Brendan O'Neill about this, but guess what? Technology got in the way. So instead, we've got our top panel with us to discuss this question, Novara Media founder Aaron Bastani and Deputy Editor of Conservative Home, Henry Hill. Henry, why am I talking about MPs wanting to build a new airport in Pakistan, many of whom lobbied so we couldn't expand the airport at Heathrow? I feel like I'm going insane. Just talk me through this.
I mean, clearly they just have a much lower concern for the good night's sleep of the people of Mirpur versus their own constituents. I think this isn't identity politics, because identity politics is kind of like the politics of intersectionality and all of that. This is much more straightforwardly sort of communal interest politics.
Yeah. And sectarianism, right?
Well, I don't know. Well, sectarianism is more religious, but I don't know. The thing is that you can, if you know Parliament at all, there are groups of MPs who will call for anything, right? There are APPGs for anything. Writing a letter is very easy, and if that's all it was, I would simply put this on the list of every other crazy thing that you can somehow get MPs from 4 different parties to get in a room to agree to because there was free drinks, right, and all of that. But actually, one, it is really riling that these people are opposed to vital infrastructure in this country. And I think it's really good to have anything that puts a spotlight on MPs lobbying against that. But it is also in the context of having, for the first time, really members of Parliament who seems to be elected primarily on the basis of the conflict in Israel, nothing to do with British politics. And I think that's the thing that actually rankles. There's no problem with, I have no problem with diaspora communities maintaining an interest in the places where they or their families may have come from. But it's the fact that there now might appear to be a sort of organised fraction with the 5 MPs, but then a broader tendency of people who actually are organising their politics around this.
Aaron, are you troubled by this?
Trouble's a strong word. I mean,
that's a classic Aaron Bastani start to an answer, isn't it?
I don't want to say.
But seriously, being a man on the left, does this degree of sectarianism or communal politics, as Henry said, does this not actually trouble you?
Well, I don't think it's even necessarily a left-wing issue. I think there are too many MPs deviating from the core fundamentals of their job, which is to represent their constituents and to be national legislators who govern the best interests of the country.
And some of them are from Birmingham, which is currently, covered in piles of heap and bankrupt and not functioning. So why on earth are they lobbying about Pakistan?
Quite. So, there'll be signatories on that list of the 20 signatories. They just, like you say, they get an email, they say, yeah, whatever. And they probably aren't as invested in it as other people. But I've said this many times, you've got Labour friends of this country, Labour friends of that country, Labour friends of that country. I would scrap all of them. I think you need to be the Labour or the Conservative friend of your constituents.
Well, I was going to say, you downplayed it for obvious reasons, but over the longer term, this is going to weaken the Labour movement, because increasingly the Labour Party, the Labour movement, will be seen as a movement for factional, racial, ethnic, religious interests, rather than a movement that is focused on the betterment of the country, of the national interest. And this is where I think the left is shooting itself in the foot. Look at some of the independent candidates who have been elected in recent weeks, not the last general election, but in recent weeks. They've been campaigning explicitly on the issue of Gaza. I mean, they're not talking about British political issues.
I mean, I sort of disagree on that. You're talking in particular about the candidate in Wes Streeting's neck of the woods, out in It's still in Greater London,
Ilford,
isn't it?
yeah.
Yeah, Ilford, exactly. They were also talking about the bread and butter issues of local government, as you have to do if you ever want to be a councillor, refuse collection.
Yeah, but they're also giving a nod, wink, wink.
Well, of course, but I think, look, you're trying to contest democratic elections. If you win, and that's what people in your area, your ward, your constituency care about, that's all well and good. I do think there is clearly a tendency, and by the way, look at the Conservative Party in Harrow. The exact same thing you're talking about with regards to Hindutva and Indian nationalist politics. The exact same thing pertains. They were rallying people to vote against the Labour candidate in 2019, saying this person is a friend of Pakistani Kashmir. I think it's a real problem. And I do think there needs to be a sort of cultural reset with regards to who MPs represent, why they're in those jobs. When I see, for instance, MPs talking about Israel, 70% of Tory MPs in the last Parliament were Conservative Friends of Israel. I think, what the hell is going on?
Henry, if we just take a step back, I mean, how concerned do we actually need to be here about this sectarian politics? It does seem to be taking root in this country.
I think it is worrying. Aaron is entirely right that actually this has always been a part of politics when it's possible, right? Look at the Conservative Party mobilising the Protestant vote up until about the 1970s, when it used to win very heavily in Liverpool on the basis. But the fact that it could win by mobilising the Protestant vote didn't say anything good about the state of Liverpool. And I think that's the thing. It is a legitimate thing, but the fracturing of the country is bad news.
Well, let's see how this evolves. We'll be watching it, that's for sure. Thank you to my top panel tonight. Now, Donald Trump is now only minutes away from taking the podium. So what we're going to do is go straight over to Patrick Christis to talk about Donald Trump's seminal, perhaps historic statement here on the looming tariffs. You've been with me, Matt Goodwin, on State of the Nation, right here on GB News. Stick around.
Good evening. You are about to witness the start of a new world order. Whatever you had planned this evening, stop it, cancel it, because any moment now, President Donald J. Trump will stride into the White House Rose Garden and reshape the global economy.
Tariffs, 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 tariffs. It's a beautiful word, isn't it?
What you're about to witness could spark a global trade war, plunge Britain into recession and perhaps even kickstart World War III. Sir Keir Starmer was desperate to avoid tariffs on Britain.
This is a letter from His Majesty the King. It's an invitation for a second state visit. This is really special.
The charm offensive seems to have failed, and now we're braced for impact.
It's the final week to see how you could spruce up your spring, as we have an incredible £17,777 in tax-free cash to be won. And if that wasn't enough, we'll also give you the latest Mulberry handbag, and not one, but two sought-after designer watches. Make sure you don't miss out, as lines close on the 4th of April. For another chance to win the lot, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB12 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 4th of April. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Mornings don't have to be